So Warren Buffett just did something he's never done in his nearly 70-year career. He wrote what really truly feels like his final letter to shareholders. But you know, this isn't just about the numbers. It's a rare, incredibly personal look inside the mind of a legend as he gets ready to pass the torch. Let's break down what he had to say.
And of course, he kicks things off with that classic Buffett wit. This letter is basically his way of saying, hey, the era of my marathon annual meetings and those super detailed yearly reports, it's over. But in true Buffett fashion, he says he's only sort of going quiet. He's stepping back from the microphone, for sure, but he is not stepping back from sharing his wisdom.
And believe me, this letter wasn't just words. He backed it up with a massive Thanksgiving donation. He took 1,800 of his super high-value Class A shares and converted them into a jaw-dropping 2.7 million of the more accessible Class B shares. Now, why does that matter? Well, it makes the wealth a whole lot easier to distribute. And every single one of those shares was headed for philanthropy.
Okay, so where did nearly 3 million shares actually go? As you can see right here, the biggest chunk, a full 1.5 million shares, went to the foundation named for his late wife, Susan. The rest? It was split evenly, 400,000 shares each, among the 3 foundations run by his children.
The letter also puts to bed any speculation about the future of Berkshire Hathaway. The torch is officially passed to Greg Abel. And Buffett doesn't just name him, he heaps praise on the guy, calling him a hardworking, direct manager, which in Buffett's view is a real rarity. This is Buffett signaling to the entire world that his company is in very, very capable hands.
All right, let's get to the real heart of the letter. This is where Buffett argues that his whole life, all of his success, is completely inseparable from one place: his simple, unassuming hometown of Omaha, Nebraska. He's convinced he and Berkshire succeeded because of Omaha, not in spite of it.
And he tells this fantastic story from 1938 to prove his point. He's just an 8-year-old kid with a medical emergency. A doctor actually makes a house call, I mean, can you imagine that today? And rushes him to the hospital for appendix surgery. He ends up spending 3 weeks recovering, being cared for by nuns. And in a detail that is just pure Buffett, he used a fingerprinting kit to document the nuns, just in case the FBI ever needed a hand.
So this is where he really starts building his case for Omaha, by introducing the people who made it all possible. First up, the legend himself, Charlie Munger, his partner for over 60 years. And it's a classic, small-town story. They lived just a block apart, they even worked at the same grocery store as kids, but they didn't actually meet until years later. And that partnership, well, it would literally change the face of investing.
Next up, Stan Lipsey. So, a newspaper Berkshire owned was failing. Who did Buffett call? Did he hire some expensive big-shot consultant from New York? Nope, he called his guy from Omaha. Lipsey went to Buffalo, launched a Sunday edition against a really tough competitor, and turned that failing paper into a cash machine that helped fuel Berkshire's other investments. It's a perfect example of Omaha talent driving massive success. Then you've got Walter Scott Jr., another neighbor. It was Scott who helped put together one of Berkshire's biggest deals ever, the acquisition of Mid-American Energy. And this wasn't just a business deal. It was a friendship, a partnership that brought a massive, stable utility company into the Berkshire family, and Scott became a huge player on the board. And finally, Don Keough, literally the guy across the street. He went from being a coffee salesman to becoming the president of Coca-Cola. Now, he's famous for presiding over the new Coke disaster, which was one of the biggest marketing blunders of all time. But his public apology, where he admitted the public owns the brand, not the company, wow, that is now taught in business schools as a masterclass in humility.
So what's the big takeaway from all these stories? Look, Buffett wasn't some small-town guy by accident. He had worked in the cutthroat worlds of New York and D.C. He chose to go back to Omaha. And why? Because he believed that a grounded, community-focused place was the secret to clear thinking, a strong business, and frankly, a good life. Okay, so the letter then pivots. It moves from the physical place of Omaha to something much, much more philosophical. Buffett starts to really grapple with 2 powerful forces that have shaped his life: incredible luck and the undeniable march of time. And he asks a question that really gets to the heart of his entire philosophy. Why aren't people equally lucky? This isn't just some rhetorical question, it's the foundation for one of his most famous ideas, what he calls the ovarian lottery. It's his way of saying, hey, a huge part of my success was pretty much decided the second I was born. And he does not mince words about what his winning ticket looked like. As you can see, he lays it right out. Being born male, white, and in America in 1930. He's not just being modest here, he's being brutally realistic. He believes these unearned advantages gave him a head start that was almost impossible for others to overcome.
I love how he personifies these forces. For almost a century, Lady Luck has been his best friend, but now, at 95 years old, he admits that Father Time is making his presence known. He's really candid about the realities of aging: poorer balance, fading eyesight, memories starting to slip. You know, Luck gave him a very long runway, but Time is making sure the flight eventually lands.
So, with time becoming more and more precious, the focus shifts to the future. Specifically, how does he make sure his life's other great mission, giving away all his wealth, continues effectively long after he's gone?
His plan is actually pretty brilliant. Speed things up. He points out that his children are already in their late 60s and early 70s. He wants them to have the chance to manage this wealth now, at the peak of their own wisdom and experience, instead of waiting. He's avoiding that classic trap of trying to control his legacy from beyond the grave.
And what does he expect from them? Not miracles, that's for sure. As this quote shows, his bar for success is remarkably humble. After seeing so many well-intentioned philanthropic projects just completely fail, he tells his kids that if they can just avoid any major screw-ups and do a little bit better than average, he'll consider it a massive win.
All right, let's move to the final and I think most powerful section where Buffett leaves us with some timeless lessons on what it really means to live a good life and how we are ultimately remembered.
And to really hammer his final point home, he tells the absolutely wild story of Alfred Nobel. Now, we all know the Nobel Prize, right? But the story behind it is shocking. Imagine waking up one morning, picking up the newspaper, and reading your own obituary. That is exactly what happened to Alfred Nobel.
The headline read, "The Merchant of Death is dead." You see, the paper had mixed him up with his brother. Nobel, the guy who invented dynamite, was horrified. He suddenly realized that his legacy was going to be one of death and destruction. That one single, mistaken headline completely changed the course of history. He spent the rest of his life and his fortune creating the Nobel Prizes, completely rewriting how the world would remember.
So after a story like that, what's Buffett's big takeaway? It's surprisingly simple. It all comes down to the golden rule. He's not pretending to be perfect. He's the first to say he's made plenty of mistakes, but he credits his friends and this one core principle with keeping him on the right path.
And so, he leaves us with a challenge. He's telling us not to wait for someone else to write our story. Don't wait for some mistaken obituary to show you how the world really sees you. Decide today what you want your legacy to be, and then go out and live the life that earns it. A really powerful final thought from one of the greatest investors and thinkers of our time.